Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am super excited for today's video. We are going to be ranking all of the eyeshadow palettes that I used throughout the month of July. Before we get into it, can I just say that July feels like the month feels like it went by really fast, but then like I look back and I'm like, July felt like it was the longest month ever also. Only because I'm like, I feel like, one, I read so many books in July, but I'm like, July went by so fast, but like the beginning of July feels like it was months ago. And then I ended up using a total of 33 eyeshadow palettes throughout the month of July, which is my best month yet. But yet I feel like I was wearing makeup the least in July, as well as just like many days that I was doing my makeup. I was just using like my Kaja stack. So I'm like, when in July did I have time to use all of these eyeshadow palettes that I'm ranking today? Nevertheless, I do have 33 to rank for you guys today. So if you're interested in seeing how I would rank them, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel, you like project planning content, palette themed content, or just chit-chatting about makeup, I'd love for you to consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's get into the ranking. Let's get into it. So I really struggled to rank all these palettes because when I like start to lay my palettes out and get them ready to rank, I'll usually do like piles of like, I really liked these are really good, I had so much fun with these, and then I'll do my palettes of like, I really didn't have so much fun with, you know, these specific palettes. And there really wasn't a lot that I didn't enjoy using, and there was a ton that I really did enjoy using. Plus I have all my neutral day-to-day palettes that are very functional for me. So some of the ones that you're seeing ranked towards the bottom, I may have only reached into that palette for like a shade or two. So if I only reached into that palette for like one shade, I ranked it lower, even if I really do overall enjoy the palette. And that's all I have to say. I'm just prefacing it by saying that. So let's get into it, starting with my least favorite palette of the month. And it was actually the ColourPop Alice in Wonderland palette. And this, I am still, like, this is new to my collection this year. I am not surprised that I've had it for months and still have really yet to test it or wear it. But I thought that this pink shade would be a really fun nail polish, which I know I keep promising I'm gonna make a nail polish video and then I don't. So I will eventually make one. But I didn't realize that this is more of like a super shock shadow. So it did not look great as a nail polish. And I just don't see myself using like a mid-toned pink as a super shock. And that's literally the only shade I've used in this palette. So it's my only experience with this palette thus far. So that's why I'm ranking this one at the bottom. I'm still very excited to play around and test this palette, and do need to get around to testing it out. But I only used one shade and it's my lowest ranked for the month of July. Then I have my Scooby-Doo palette. This is the second collaboration that Glamlight did with Scooby-Doo. And I only reached into this palette for one shade, and I can't even remember what shade it was that I reached into this palette for. I think it may have just been the brown. Like, I truly don't remember. And I really need to get around to using this a few times this summer because I'm so excited about like this cobalt blue. I'm super excited about this tangerine shade, as well as like the vibrant teal up top. Plus Glamlight just has such a great like metallic formula as well. I'm very excited to play with this palette, but I haven't gotten around to doing so because this palette also just like intimidates me a little bit. So because I only reached into this palette for one shade and I literally can't remember which shade that was, that's why this one's ranking at number 32. Then coming in at number 31, I have my Fantasy Cosmetica Druid palette. And I, do not get me wrong, I do really love this palette. I cannot wait to play around with this palette this fall. This is my level 2 palette in my project Level Up. But I didn't reach into this palette for like the fun shades at all. I just reached into this palette for these two matte shades, and then I reached into this gold one time. So I didn't really play around and create anything like super inspiring from this palette. So that's the only reason I'm ranking this one at number 31. Yes. I anticipate come the fall months, as I'm reaching for this more because it will be in my project Level Up, this will rank higher. Then coming in at number 30, I have this one from NARS. This is the NARS Climax palette, and I reached into this palette just to deepen up a mauve look that I was doing, and I used this shade right here, which worked just fine, but I actually don't love the matte shades in this palette. I prefer this palette more for the like chunky textured metallics. So on top of just using this palette for the one shade, I also don't love the mattes in this one. So that is why that one is ranking at number 30. Then I have number 29, which is going to my Sigma Enchanted palette. Again, only reached into this palette for one shade, and it was this mauve pink shade right here. I do love this palette, but I only reached into it for that shade. So that one is ranking at number 30. Coming in at number 29. This is my first palette that's like ranking lower that I actually used, I think, all of the shades in the month of July. This is my Natasha Denona Midi pastel palette. This is what it looks like. And while I do like this palette, I just feel like I look into this palette and I am like, but what do I do with this? Just because I struggle to, I feel like I like color, but I like a pop of color. Like I like a mostly neutral look with like a pop of color. That's how I feel comfortable using and wearing color, just my skill set mostly. So I just look into this palette and I'm a little bit confused on how I can like create a full look using this palette. There were a couple looks that I enjoyed, didn't absolutely love, and I think I'll actually enjoy this palette more using this to make my own like custom Natasha palettes, like taking shades out of this and mixing it with other Natasha shades. I really do love the shade Bubble. I was also really impressed by the shade Adriatic, this one right here. I really like the shade Feather. I love the shade Limoncello. I love Zest. Like there's shade for shade, I really like the shades in here, but this palette as a whole and just using it to create one look, I don't love it. I also think like this is truly like a pastel palette, so for me it works better if I'm laying down like a white base. If I really want the colors to pop, I'm finding like, I think I'm drawn to pastel palettes because they seem more approachable because the colors are like a little bit lighter in tone. But then in my mind, they're gonna be these super punchy, colorful shades on my eyes. And then when they're not, I'm like, but why? And it's like, because you bought a pastel palette. You didn't buy this like bright, vibrant rainbow palette stuff. So like, set your expectations to like what you're buying. But this, I believe, I think we're at 29. Inevitably, I've been chatting, so I forgot what number we're on. We're gonna go with that being number 29. And coming in at number 28, I have the Pat McGrath Utopian palette. I did end up reaching into this palette just for like a shade or two. I think it was one of these shades, possibly this shade as well. So I didn't reach into this palette for many of the shades. I do really enjoy this palette overall from Pat McGrath. It's probably my third favorite in my collection at this current moment. I really do love these two shades as well as these two shades. I think are beautiful, but not like the super most exciting palette either. So that is my number 28. Coming in at number 27, I have this one from Odin's Eye. This is the Norns eyeshadow palette, and I did only reach into this palette this month for the shade Pink Chameleon. I am trying to hit pan on the shade Pink Chameleon, and I did just learn that they have, I believe, reformulated and repackaged the Odin's Eye Norns palette. So now the pans, I think in the palette, are the same shape as some of the other Odin's Eye shades, so they look like this. And I believe they reformulated. I personally didn't have a problem with this formulation at all. I actually really enjoyed this palette. I am excited to continue to pull this out for the fall. I think I'll have fun with this palette in the fall time as well. Did not yet hit a pan on that shade Pink Chameleon, but didn't feel like I should rank this much higher just because I was really only using it as an inner corner highlight. So that's my number 27. Coming in at number 26, I have this one from NARS, and this is where I was struggling. So I was like, I really love this palette from NARS. This is the Rising Orgasm palette, but I had so much more fun creating looks with some of my other palettes, and just kind of want to shout out some of the more fun palettes rather than like the everyday basic boring neutrals. But for an everyday basic boring neutral palette, this one from NARS is fantastic. This was my level 1 palette for the Project Level Up. I did end up accidentally like knocking this off of my desk, so a large chunk of this shade ended up cracking, and then I just focused my brush where I already had like a big dip going. And these are the deepest eyeshadow pans I have ever experienced in my life. Still really love this one from NARS, but I've reached for it a lot, and I'm ready to kind of move on from this palette for a little bit. I have another NARS palette but very similar to this one that's coming up in a bit that I also still really love. I love the NARS formula, love the NARS palettes. It's just an everyday basic palette. Coming in at number 25, I have this one, which was a bit of a shock to me. So this is the ColourPop Getting Fresh palette, Getting Fresh. And I said I was gonna try and No Pan Left Behind this palette and see what shades I liked. And if there were enough shades that I didn't really care for, I was gonna just depot the shades I wanted to keep and then declutter this palette. Well, I actually ended up reaching into this palette to create like a smoky, warm, bronzy look. And I loved the look that I created. I absolutely loved it. And that was the only time I reached into this palette this past month. So I still have a ways to go in getting through some of the shades in the No Pan Left Behind, but it left a better taste in my mouth than I remember or than my previous experience with this palette, and made me kind of want to consider just keeping the palette as a whole. I really enjoyed the look. So this is my number 25. Coming in at number 24, I have my Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde palette. I ended up reaching into this palette for again, a nail polish. I can't remember if I reached into, I think it was Nebula, not Ultraviolet. And I feel like I'm getting really close to a pan on Nebula. This is one of the palettes I did want to try and hit a pan on this year, so I am still hopeful that I can do that. I feel like I could still have some fun with this palette in the fall, but I would like to reach for this a couple more times in August, just because I really do like the shade Supernova as well as Gold Glitch to create like a warm smoky eye as well. So looking to reach into this palette some more in August, but for July I just reached into it for that nail polish shade. So it's my number 24, 25, whatever we're at. Then I have my Dose of Colors Friendcation palette. I do really love this palette, but I think I only reached into this possibly for like these two shades right here. So I wasn't doing anything super fancy, super special. I didn't go to a country concert, did not go to a country concert in July. So this palette was just like very basically used, and that's why it's ranking where it's at. Then I have this one from Aether Beauty. This is the Rose Quartz Crystal Quad, and this got rolled into my No Pan Left Behind project, and I'm actually so glad that it did. I ended up reaching for each of the shades within this palette two total times, and I loved, granted I got the same look both times, but I loved the look. And I think for a very quick, easy mauve look, especially like in the winter months when I'm reaching for mauves more, I really love this. And it made me kind of, it reminded me how much I really do like this little quad. So I'm very happy with that. Again, I have some colorful palettes that are ranking above this, but for just a really quick, easy quad to grab for, this is such a good one. I know Aether Beauty isn't a brand anymore, but speaking of Aether Beauty, my next palette that I am ranking is this one, and this is the Summer Solstice palette. It looks like this. Really, really, really beautiful, warm, bronzy palette. I love the mattes in this palette. They just blend so well. They're so easy to blend and to use. I didn't play with, I don't think any of the metallics this past month, maybe one of these two for an inner corner, but I can't really remember. But I just love this palette for the mattes. So that's why I'm ranking, because I only use it for the mattes. That's why it's ranking like a little bit lower, but I still do really love this palette as well. And then speaking of another neutral palette that I really do love, I have the Natasha Denona Mini Retro. I did only end up reaching into this palette for this shade right here. Actually, I do think I reached for this shade once too. I want to continue to reach into this palette because I love this palette. I just never reach for it, so I would like to show this some more love because I only reach for it for the one or two shades, like one or two times. That's why I'm ranking this one lower, but y'all know I love this palette. Then I have the What's Up Beauty Geodes palette. I ended up reaching into this palette to use the shade Peridot as a nail polish, and my nails are super embarrassing right now. Like, I really need to repaint them, but it is the shade that I have on my nails right now. I thought that I liked this as a nail polish, but the shade ended up being just like a little bit different than I expected it was going to be. So I don't necessarily know I would use this shade as a nail polish again. I do love this palette. I'm actually super impressed by both of the What's Up Beauty palettes. You'll see another one of their palettes ranking even higher in today's video. I love the shade Citrine. I have a pan in that one, and I will continue to use and love this palette. But for this past month, this is ranking at, I'm gonna count in a minute and we'll find out. Then coming in at number 17, I have this one from Kaja. It's the Kaja Stack in Chocolate Dahlia. Not the most exciting thing ever, but I reached for this so many times on just like, I just wanted to create a really quick, simple look and run out the door for work. This is like the perfect little travel stack. I love I have fallen in love with the Kaja stacks this year. I really enjoyed them a couple of years ago and kind of like fell off, and I have just really fallen back in love with the Kaja stacks. So Chocolate Dahlia is like the perfect day-to-day little stack for me, and I was reaching for this a ton on just days I was running out the door for work. So that's my number 17. Coming in at number 16, I have this one from Kaleidos. This is the Club Nebula palette, and I can't remember. A part of me thinks I reached into this as a nail polish. I literally cannot remember what I reached into this for. I'm almost positive I reached into this and used Astro for a nail polish, but I possibly used Celestial as an inner corner too. Regardless, I am hoping to keep this palette pulled and reach for it once in August, because I would love to do like a really warm corally red shade with the bottom row. I just love this palette, so even if I reach for it for one shade, that I'm ranking it higher because I just want to shout it out because I love it so much. Love the color story. Coming in at number 16, I have 16 or 15. Coming in at number 15, I believe. Who knows? I have this one from Pat McGrath. This is the Moonlit Seduction palette. This is a really, really beautiful one from Pat McGrath. And I feel like the more I get use out of this palette, I'm just gonna fall in love with it more. It took me a bit to fall in love with Pat McGrath's Bronze Seduction, but I have just such a soft spot for that palette now, and I feel like the same is gonna happen with this Moonlit Seduction palette. These 5 shades, they're so sparkly, so beautiful. This is such a beautiful blue brown shade. It's so wet and glossy and shimmery and sparkly on the eyes. I just absolutely love it. Now, I did only end up reaching into this palette once. I did create a full look using this palette this past month, but I only reached for it one time, so that's why I decided to rank it a little bit lower. Plus, I have some fun colorful palettes coming up that I just, you know, felt a little bit more highly from this month, but I do really like Moonlit Seduction from Pat McGrath. So next up in the ranking is ABH Jackie. I created my favorite go-to look with this palette. Plus, I reached into this a few other times. I used this shade Shookington, this really beautiful shimmery purple on my lower lash. I've been loving like a purple on the lower lash. So I've been having fun doing that. We know I love the ABH Jackie palette so much. So this one is my number 14-ish. And then coming in at number 13, speaking of Pat McGrath Bronze Seduction, I have the Pat McGrath Bronze Seduction right here. I absolutely love and adore this palette. I find myself reaching for this palette quite often in the summer. Often I'll do like a warm brown smoky eye, and then I will just pop this green shade right on top. It's like one of my favorite shades in my entire collection. I also really love this pink shade right here, and this is my favorite gold in my collection. I say it so much, it's like I pull this palette out and then I can just like press play on like the repeated statement I always make about this palette, but love that one so much. I anticipate I will reach for that a little bit more in August as well. I'm on number 11. Did I talk about 33 palettes in this video? It doesn't feel like it. Maybe I miscounted. On my list of palettes, I should have had 33. Hopefully I pulled them all out. Who knows? I'm just like the best, most organized human ever, right? Coming in at number 11, we have this one from Moira Cosmetics. Now, I did only end up reaching for this a few times, and most of the times that I reached for this palette, I was just reaching in for one of the bright pops, and I was using it on the inner corner of my eyes, but I loved that. I absolutely loved the looks that I created with this palette, which is why I'm ranking this one so high. I haven't finished testing this palette. I still have quite a few shades still to use, but I really love Moo, this cobalt blue. I love the bright neon orange. I also love the bright neon, love the bright neon yellow. And then I will say the shade Fun Times, like some of the shimmer shades, I'm not as impressed by their shimmer formula. I actually, in general, I don't know like if I'm uber impressed. Like, it's definitely not the best eyeshadow formula on the market. It still works really nicely, and I am impressed with the way that the matte shades perform, especially for being so bright and colorful. But just had to shout this one out and rank this at number 11 because I just was loving a bright neon on the inner corner with like a wing and not a whole lot else on the eyes. So, and this is my first experience with Moira, so still testing this one out, but did love the looks that I created with it. All right guys, that means we're into the top 10. So coming in at number 10, we have a summer staple favorite in my collection. It's the Viseart Soleil Le Plug palette. I just think this is such a beautiful palette. This palette made me want to give Viseart another try. I just feel like I didn't have the best luck with Viseart in the past, and I think maybe it's because I had different expectations than what like I should have. But it is such a beautiful buildable eyeshadow formula. I love that it doesn't go on the eyes way too pigmented, because sometimes when I'm in a hurry, I just need a light pigmentation, so it's gonna blend quick and easy. I love the yellows in this palette. I just think they're so beautiful. It's just such a good palette. What palette should I try from Viseart next? Is there one currently on the market you guys think I should try next? There's a few really pretty ones I've had my eye on, but I would love to know if you have a recommendation on your favorite Viseart palette. This was my number 10 most favorite used palette in July. Coming in at number 9, I have this one from NARS. I love this palette so much. This is the NARS Summer Solstice. I know like all NARS palettes are, this is limited edition, so you can't get this anymore. But when I'm telling you, like, this is one of my favorite shades ever. This like really beautiful champagne lid topper. I also love it on the inner corner. I wore it on the inner corner earlier today to work. I took that look off and then I did my makeup again. But truly, it's just this really beautiful, like, just has the most beautiful sparkle to it. I love it. And then I just have, you know, neutral browns that are just perfect, as well as I actually really like this satin, like mid-toned bronzy shade too. I love this palette so much. It's number 9 because I had so much fun with some color. Like, summer is all about having fun with color for me, so that's why this one's ranking a little bit lower. But I think in terms of, yep, this is my highest ranked neutral palette from the month. Okay, coming in at number 8, we have my Project Level Up Level 3 palette. It is the Kaleidos Escape Pod. I've had so much fun playing around with this. This shade right here, the shade Soiree, this really beautiful, like punchy periwinkle, like neon purpley lavender, like but neon, like lavender but make it neon. This on the lower lash line, I love it so much. I love it so much. I also really like, speaking of like really sparkly inner corner highlight shades, love the shade Starlight Sonata for that, and have just had some fun playing around with color. So I'm kind of really glad this got rolled in to that project, just to like really make me reach into this palette more than just like one time. I used the shade Cosmic Cabaret as a nail polish. Loved it as a nail polish. I think it'd be a really beautiful nail polish in the fall time too, and just been having so much fun with this one. So this is my number 8 for ranking. Coming in at number 7, we have the eyeshadow palette that's on my eyes today. I definitely liked the look, a different look that I created with this. I'm like, I don't hate my eyeshadow. I just like, it wasn't exactly like, I wasn't sure what I wanted going into it, but it is what it is. This is the Odin's Eye Jewels and Gem palette. I have now officially used every single shade in this palette. I will have another ranking. I'll rank all the new palettes that I've tried lately, where I'll go more in depth. But I will say overall, I am happy with this palette. I don't think it's my favorite Odin's Eye palette. The color story like throws me off just a little bit. Like, I kind of know what to create, kind of don't know what to create. And I will say that I am just, there were some shimmers in here that I really like, and some, like the one that I have on today, just took a little bit of building. And maybe it's just because, again, my expectation for what the shade is versus like the actual formula it is just different. But I do feel like a little bit confused when looking into this palette, and just me and my not super creative mind trying to come up with my own look in my head. I will say the shade Rhapsody is like one of the most beautiful, and it just feels literally wet to the touch. It's this really beautiful iridescent, like blue pink shifty shade. It's so pretty. I'm excited to like pair this even just with like a bronzer in the crease of the eyes. I think would be absolutely stunning. So I'm excited to continue to use this. I've used every single shade, like I said, and I really do enjoy it. It's just, I thought that this was going to turn into like my new top favorite Odin's Eye palette, and it's not my favorite of all of my Odin's Eye palettes. I still love the palette overall, and that is what it is. I'm like, what am I even saying at this point in time? Okay, coming in at, we're at number 10, 8, you guys. Tell me that this isn't a curveball. But this is actually a palette I recluttered into my collection, and my number 8 for the month of July, which, keep in mind, the month of July was the month, it feels like, that Barbie took the world by storm. But I have the Juvia's Place, the Pinks palette, and I used this as a nail polish and freaking loved it. Like, freaking loved that shade as a bright hot pink nail polish. We'll absolutely be doing that again before the end of the summer. But I also just forgot how good, like, I just don't have pink matte shades like these two either. And I actually do really, like, I'm like, I shouldn't have ever decluttered this. So I'm very happy that I've recluttered this into my collection, and it was my 7th favorite palette that I use throughout the month of July. Coming in at numero 6, I have the Lethal Cosmetics Wildflower palette. This is so pretty. And I will say, this is a palette that I look into this and I'm like, how the heck am I ever gonna create a full look with this palette? I did end up following at least 1, if not 2 tutorials as I was trying to test this out. But I really enjoy this palette. I'm very impressed by both the matte as well as the like special formula. There are so many different like finishes amongst the like metallic shimmery shades that I just absolutely love. I love this purple shade right here. I also really enjoyed this like metallic bluey purple. I love this shade right here. Love the whole palette. It's so pretty, and I kind of want to get the sister palette to this now. Like, I really kind of want to do it. But I was super impressed with this one from Lethal. This is my first experience using a Lethal palette, and I am very pleased with my first experience with Lethal Cosmetics. And then coming in at number 4? Number 4, you guys, am I counting right? I don't know. Number 4 is my cap is broken off. It is the Cleota Dragon Fruit palette. Just, I mean, fun summer shimmery colors. Yes, please. I'm going to continue to use this in August. I anticipate this will rank highly in August. I love this palette so much. It is definitely a companion palette. Like, I'm not creating a full look just using this palette, but I created a look with the shade Fruit Fizz all over the lid, which is this really beautiful like orangey shade. I also love the shade Effervescent and Bubbles for an inner corner. I really want to create something with these greens this next month, and I just love this palette as a whole. So this would be my number 4. And then coming in at number 3, I have my Danessa Myricks Lightwork Volume 3. We could press play to my like standard recording of like what I always say about this palette, but it's so unique to my collection. Just really beautiful multi-chrome shades, different finishes. You can layer these shades to create even more shades than the 8 shades that are in here. I know it's a very expensive palette, but if you are looking for just like one investment palette that you can use as like a companion palette to your other palettes to just add something special, like, I would recommend purchasing something like this over like a Pat McGrath palette if you're looking for like special shades, because this is truly 8 very special shades, very special shades. And the shade Polaris is this cream. I love this shade. It's this cream. On camera it looks like almost like an orangey champagne, but in person it's this bright like lime green that kind of flips to like this teal, and then if you look at like to gold, I mean, it's so pretty. It's this multi-chrome cream shadow, and then you can layer each of these shades on top of this to like here, I'm gonna swatch. I have Galaxy on my finger right now. I'll swatch Galaxy next to that cream shade, and then I'm gonna swatch Galaxy over the cream shade, and it's like you have 2 totally different shades. Like, it's such a unique palette. So this is my number 3. I love it so much. Highly recommend. Like, if you're thinking about this palette, like, just do it. Coming in at number 2 is the other palette I was talking about from What's Up Beauty. This is the Monsoon palette, and I am so impressed with this palette. Like, I am so impressed with What's Up Beauty as a whole. They have great brushes. I'm currently testing their mascara, which I really like, and they have great eyeshadow palettes. They have great nail polishes as well. I really enjoyed this Monsoon palette. I love the color story. I find it to be a little bit more approachable than the Geodes palette for me personally. I love the shade Humidity for this like really beautiful kind of pink satin taupey shade. The shade Sun is this really beautiful golden green. It's beautiful on the eyes. It's so punchy, so metallic, so vibrant. I used the shade Downpour as a nail polish. Loved it. Again, I think it'll be a really beautiful one in the fall time when I like a darker nail. And also their mattes are just super easy to blend. So highly recommend checking out What's Up Beauty if you're looking for like a new indie brand to support, because they have a really good eyeshadow formula. And then my number one favorite palette of the month of July is actually a quad, and it's my Rowan 1111 quad. And I guess this is my highest ranked neutral palette, but I just love these Rowan quads. The textures of these cream shadows are just so unique, and they just make your eyeshadow looks just look so interesting. And this shade right here is definitely my favorite. It adds this almost like chunky texture, but it's so metallic on the eyes. It's not going to do it justice. Swatched right here, like it does not do it justice at all. But this, I was, ooh, that could have been bad. I was pairing this with this Aether Beauty Rose Quartz quad. Love the way that these two pair together. And anytime I'm wanting to do like a mauve toned eyeshadow look, I am typically reaching into my Rowan 1111 quad, usually for this shade, but I've been trying to kind of mix it up. This shade down here is actually this really beautiful, I'm like, what hand can I swatch this with? It's this really beautiful, like kind of reddy pink sort of shade that I feel like is really good for like the warm bronze looks that we're doing like this time of year. And then I love this palette. I love it so much. If you are looking for, again, kind of a really fun companion quad to just add like a just interesting textures to your collection that you can still pair with your neutrals, I highly recommend checking out the Rowan quads. This is my number one for the month of July. But I feel like I've been talking forever. That is gonna wrap it up for today's ranking video. Would love to know which palettes ranked highest, or which palettes were you just not vibing with in the month of July. Let a girl know in the comments below. Other than that, thank you guys so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting my channel as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye.